Too often, as I have said, the burden of functioning or competence, it's all about the person. We label people as high or low functioning. We label people in terms of their competence at different things, and not enough attention is given to the environments in which they exist and the activities that they have to do. And most of those environments and activities have been designed by and for neurotypical minds without consideration of an autistic perspective. So to think that there's going to naturally be a high level of match between autistic people and neurotypically designed environments and activities is probably starting out with a false sense of reality. So this worksheet is really aimed at assessing the environment and assessing the activity, and then going back to your person profile and thinking about how they all work together and what changes can be made to environments and activities, and how can people be prepped so that they are more prepared for challenges, and how can we look at a person's strengths as well and see where they might fit into an environment or activity to offer some protective support or a buffer for that person. So really this is trying to visualize just reality, which is a good thing. So let me talk a little bit about my technique in how I filled this out. I started with the person. I think it's the best place to start. And you want to spend a lot of time on this. You really want to make sure that you are including highly relevant information and what things really have that immediate influence on your energy, what things really amp you up, what are your challenges, but also what are your strengths. So as an example of that, I need a really high level of activity, and not just in duration. I really need bursts of very intense, high impact, really high resistance movements. Like I need, I do handstand push-ups so I can flip myself upside down and get a really high level of resistance and really use a lot of energy to do those. But a huge strength is that I have very good motor skills in terms of tone, coordination, strength, muscular strength, and endurance. I was an athlete my whole life, so I am able to do movements like a handstand push-up that are so regulating for me. And I can do those movements in a small amount of space and almost anywhere. So that's a huge protective factor for me, and I wanted to make sure to note that here. Now I could go through everything I put into this, but this is posted online and you can read through each detail of my person in context profile if you would like. I actually want to highlight a few pieces that tell a story, because when I picked my environment and activity, I picked things that I was certain I could describe well, and that would be a good example, to have online, because I could describe them so well, because I knew them so well, and because I had spent a lot of time considering how to cope in these environments and in this activity. And yet, in filling out the PIC, I still came to realizations about myself in that environment doing those activities that have since spurred me to make some changes in how I go about this day. So let me highlight the physiological and the interoception piece here. For me, there's a high level of interplay between interoception and physiological, as for other people. I don't perceive feelings of hunger, and this is more sensory, but I am very hypersensitive to tastes and flavors, I find many tastes, flavors, textures of foods very aversive and sharp, so I stick to these same foods at these same times all the time. Um, However, when you don't sense hunger and when you really have no desire for taste, you are less likely to remember or think about eating. So I know that a risk for me is not having enough caloric energy, physiological energy, that I don't take in enough food at times. And going back to my sensory motor need to be in movement and doing high impact movements often throughout the day. Certainly, I also probably have higher energy needs. So I'm eating far less than I should be anyway, and I'm definitely eating far less than I should for what I do throughout a day in terms of my activity. So, and this is something that I know is a risk for myself in any environment, regardless of the activity. Now, we also have sections for cognitive, communication, social. I encourage you to read those because they are very relevant to the environment and activity that I have selected, but I want to focus on this storyline so that I'm not just reading you a book. All right, so once you have your person profile, really it's up to you if you want to do the activity or the environment first. There's often a lot of interplay. Often there are activities that only occur within certain environments, so sometimes they'll go more hand in hand, sometimes they'll be more separate. But in this case, I did the environment first just because there are several activities that occur within this environment. So I went from the larger environment to the more specific activity. That was my game plan, but it really is player's choice in for this support. So I'm gonna stick with focusing on the physiological and interoception. I'm also gonna bring up one cognitive piece about myself, which is I have a very high need for predictability and routine. As I mentioned, I eat pretty much the same foods at the same time every day. And what I realized in doing this sheet is that the time that I usually eat is the exact time that my meetings begin on this one day where I go to this specific office and have these meetings. So that was critical for me, and I'll talk more about it. But I'm going to look at the physiological and interoceptive processes and demands that may be relevant to the environment. So I started writing things like, did I remember to pack a lunch? I'm noting that there's always water and coffee available in this environment. And I'm also noting that there's a scent-free bathroom available. I noted that in sensory and motor as well, I think. I often use this scent-free bathroom to escape, to do some of that physical activity that I need, and just take breaks and be away from the sounds of an office environment. For interoception, I then said, okay, I may have packed a lunch, but am I going to actually remember to eat it? You know, it could be in the fridge. That doesn't mean I'm going to get any kind of signal that I'm hungry. And also, when other people start eating their lunches in an office, my response is to run and hide in that scent-free bathroom to escape whatever they heated up that day. Soup smell is a terrible one. French fries, can't stand. I don't know. There's just something about the smell of other people's cooking being reheated that feels like it sinks into my clothing, and it is all I can smell for the rest of the day, and I will not be able to attend to anything else. So when people ask me, well, don't you see other people eating and want to or think I should eat? No, I think I should run away, and that's what I do. So that was key for me. I didn't even say that this activity and this environment, it's one day per week that I have to go to this specific office and have these weekly meetings. The rest of the week, I'm fortunate enough that my job allows for me to work from home. So this is really the one day where I have to be out humaning in the world, which was also why it was important to choose this environment and activity to fill out. So with the activity, it was hard to consider things that were physiological and interoceptive about the activity, but it was also obvious that being in a meeting or being in any situation without those physiological needs met would be a challenge or a risk factor for me that could worsen or amplify any of these other risks and anything in my person profile. So when I am lacking sleep, or perhaps when I am hungry, I don't really know when I'm hungry, but I'm sure it influences me. My hypersensitivities to sound, to human voices, to chewing noises, to smells and scents, and my need to escape to that bathroom are all going to be so much higher than if I have slept well, if I am nourished. These physiological things have a huge influence on regulation, whether we are aware of it or not. And again, this just is filling out each of those sections for the activity and for the environment. And this is in some ways easier than doing the person profile, because you'll know immediately what stands out in the environment for you. Or if you work with an autistic person, you'll know what things in the environment set them off, if you truly know them. If you are more on the periphery, you may need to do a little investigating and really thoroughly assess the environment, thinking about some of these considerations that we have laid out, and perhaps using the examples that we have up there to help guide your thinking. So then your person factors, your environment factors, and your activity factors all get put into one sheet. And what you do here is you look for the matches and mismatches. And this is what I was getting at before, is that I realized the timing of meetings at this place is such that they begin when, in that very strong routine of mine, I usually eat. I am prone to forgetting as they begin at my routine lunchtime, and I do not think of eating in anticipation of the meetings. So even though my routine is very strong, when I'm at this place and about to be confronted with this really not preferred activity that has high social and cognitive demands for me, there's a lot of anticipation and amping up of my energy, and I'm not sensing hunger, and I'm not thinking about wanting to put flavors in my mouth. So there was pretty much no way that I was eating before those meetings. And by the time the meetings were done, we're talking not eating until 3-4 p.m. Because I also would have to drive home. So that's not good. I mean, that's putting myself in a very risky position, and greatly increasing the likelihood that any of my other areas that could be challenges, like the sensory or my executive functioning, they'll be influenced by that lack of energy for sure. And I mean, if I had to add in, I didn't sleep the night before in anticipation of this day, even worse, right? So that was an important discovery for me. This top piece is just a continuation of what we were looking at on the last page, but at the bottom there's some boxes to fill in strategies for partners, people in your environment, and that do those activities with you, and the accommodations that you may need for any activity and environment, tools and resources available, things that you could note about the environment or the activity that are important in that they could be helpful to you. And there's strategies for the individual. So because I had this realization of the timing of these meetings and what it was doing to my eating schedule, I put in here set an alarm or calendar reminder for lunch, reminders of those physical activity breaks, and include a physical activity break right before that first meeting. And I'm reminding myself that having fuel and having physical activity are really protective for me. And I have started doing that, and it does make a difference for me. I also, you can take a look at the social and communication aspects. I put in here for myself to state right at the beginning of a meeting that I have to leave as soon as the important information is covered. Make it a point if I really have to attend in person each week, if I can call in or listen in, if I'm not needed as a really active participant. Don't put myself in a position where I'm just going to be sitting there not seeing the purpose in why I'm there. And then I also made notes in terms of the food to eat during meetings if necessary. I said the humans unfortunately seem to find this acceptable. I don't know if I ever would eat during a meeting. I don't know if I could multitask like that. Like, it's two really big tasks, but if necessary, I just wanted to remind myself that it is a possibility. And then again, along that social communication line, I have throughout this that in these meetings, there tends to be an agenda, but then when the agenda ends, people sit around and talk, and I don't know if I can leave, and it really amps up my energy to know that the meeting is over in terms of the time that was allotted for it, and in terms of the agenda items, but we're all still sitting here talking like we're in a meeting, so I don't know if I can leave, and it's a very dysregulating experience for me, especially if that happens in like the last meeting right before I can escape this environment and get home to rest and recover. I start feeling like I need to flip the table over. Just my energy just skyrockets in that situation. So I do have strategies for partners about explicit statement of when the real meeting has ended and I can leave the room. Keeping conversations related to tasks at hand when interacting with me. And if I'm not needed for a face-to-face meeting, please let me know ahead of time. So just to sum up, I really love the person in context support. I think it's a really useful and logical and fair assessment of a person in an environment and doing a given activity. And if you are filling this out for yourself, or if you're filling it out for an autistic person with whom you work, it goes so much further to see right up front that we're thinking about the person and who they are as a person, and we're thinking about how that fits with the environments and activities to which they are exposed. And we're establishing that person profile not to label it as good or bad or high or low or anything like that, but to say this is who that person is, and we need to keep that intact, and understand it and make our changes and modifications to environments and to activities in ways that we can to help support this person's needs, while also recognizing that we can empower that person with strategies, tools, and things they can do on their own to cope with environments and activities that have not been designed by or for minds like theirs. So it goes a lot further in establishing trust and getting to know that autistic person for their true valid self, and allowing them really the freedom and health of not having to conform, and not having to just pass and get by looking like a neurotypical carrying out that same activity in that same environment. So I think it's a really powerful tool. If anyone out there has filled it out for themselves or for an autistic person with whom they work, play, collaborate, support, please let us know. And as always, please let us know of any feedback or ideas for improvement or future supports that you might think of or think there's a need for.